At the red light, a furious Mafia boss slammed his car in rage until his eyes froze on a woman selling roses in the rain. His world stopped. She wasn't a stranger. She was the wife he buried 3 years ago, holding a little boy with his eyes. Now every truth he buried is about to rise, and the empire he built will burn for love that refused to die. Rain hammered against the windshield like a warning from the heavens. The night reeked of gasoline, betrayal, and blood that hadn't yet been spilled. Martin Voss sat behind the wheel of his obsidian black Mercedes, his knuckles bone white as he gripped the steering wheel. The rhythmic flash of the red traffic light painted his face in angry pulses of crimson. The color of his fury, the color of his empire burning down around him. Betrayal had a taste, he thought, metallic and bitter. Like the gunpowder on his hands. He wanted to drive straight through the light, through the city, through anyone who dared to stand between him and vengeance. But fate, cruel and calculated, made him wait. His jaw clenched, his breath shallow. The radio played low, a static hum, the ghost of a jazz tune. But his thoughts were louder than any song. Every deal he'd made, every bullet he'd fired, every promise broken crashed through his skull in echoes. Someone inside his circle had turned. Someone had lit the fuse beneath his throne. And now his world was collapsing brick by brick. Find him, he had told his men an hour ago. Find the traitor. Yet, sitting there under the city's bleeding lights, even vengeance felt hollow, until someone caught his eye. Through the blurred curtain of rain, he saw movement on the sidewalk. A woman stood under a flickering street lamp, soaked to the bone, clutching a basket of wilting flowers. The lamplight trembled across her face, revealing the kind of exhaustion that comes from years of running. Her shawl was thin, her posture fragile, but her presence struck him harder than any bullet ever had. Martin's fingers froze mid-grip, his breath hitched in his throat. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The chaos, the rain, the city, all disappeared into a silent vacuum. His gaze locked on her face, and then the impossible happened. Anila. The name tore through his chest like lightning through dry wood. Anila, his wife. The woman he had buried 3 years ago, the woman whose grave he had stood over, drunk on grief and disbelief, clutching the wedding ring they said was found in the wreckage of her burning car. He had mourned her. He had broken for her. He had become the monster everyone feared because of her loss. And now she stood there, alive, trembling in the rain, her arms around a sleeping child. His mind refused to believe what his eyes saw. The rain blurred his vision, and for a moment he thought his broken heart was playing tricks. That grief had finally tipped into madness. But then the streetlight steadied, revealing her eyes, the same soft hazel that once tamed his rage. She blinked, unaware of the storm unraveling inside the car across the street. The boy stirred against her chest, his tiny hand clutching a single rose. Martin's gaze dropped to him, to the child's curly hair and porcelain skin, and then to the piercing blue eyes that mirrored his own reflection. The air left Martin's lungs. His pulse stuttered. His fury, the one that had been his armor for years, melted into something unrecognizable. Pain, confusion, ache. "Boss?" his driver asked, sensing the shift. But Martin didn't answer. His world had stopped at that crosswalk. The child looked about 2, maybe 3 years old. The math stabbed through him like a knife. 3 years since Anila vanished. 3 years since the fire. 3 years since his heart turned to ash. The timing wasn't coincidence. It was a confession. The boy's existence was a truth wrapped in silence. Martin's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to open the door, to cross that street, to demand answers from the ghost standing before him. But his body refused to move. Fear, something he hadn't felt in years, anchored him in place. The red light glowed brighter. bathing the interior of the car in blood-colored light. "Sir." "The light's green now," the driver murmured, hesitant. Martin didn't move. He couldn't. His gaze stayed locked on her, on the woman he once vowed to protect from every enemy, never realizing he'd become one of them. Anila adjusted the shawl around her shoulders, unaware that the man she once called her husband was watching her with a soul caught between rage and heartbreak. The child stirred again, pressing his cheek against her neck, and she smiled, faint, broken, but real. It was the same smile that used to stop time. Martin's chest tightened until breathing felt impossible. His hand hovered over the car door, the urge to run to her clawing through him like fire. But another voice whispered, colder, crueler. "If she's alive, why did she let you bury her? Why did she hide your son?" He swallowed hard, the storm outside nothing compared to the one inside him. His reflection in the windshield stared back, a man both powerful and powerless, trapped between fury and longing. He wanted to shout her name, to stop the car, to hold her until the truth spilled out. But all that came out of his mouth was a single broken command. "Drive," he said, his voice low, trembling, dangerous. The driver hesitated. "Sir?" Martin's eyes flicked toward him, cold and glassy. "Drive." The car rolled forward. The tires splashed through puddles, cutting through the glow of the streetlight. Anila's figure grew smaller in the side mirror, blurred by rain, yet Martin's heart pounded louder with every meter they passed. His fingers dug into the armrest, veins pulsing beneath his skin. He wanted to scream at the driver to stop, to turn back, but the words stuck in his throat like shards of glass. The light behind them turned green, a mockery of freedom, but he felt more trapped than ever. Behind them, Anila lifted her head suddenly, as if the storm itself whispered his name. Her eyes scanned the passing cars, her expression tightening, confusion flickering across her face. For a brief second, her gaze met the tinted window of Martin's car. She couldn't see him clearly, but something in her soul stirred. Her lips parted. Her heartbeat quickened. She didn't know why, but a familiar chill ran down her spine, the feeling of being watched by a presence she once loved and feared. Her arms tightened around the boy, as if protecting him from an invisible danger. Inside the car, Martin's chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. "Turn around," his heart screamed. "Turn around before she vanishes again." But he didn't, because fear, the one thing even a Mafia king couldn't conquer, told him the truth might destroy him more than her death ever did. He closed his eyes, replaying that glimpse over and over, her soaked hair clinging to her face, the basket of roses, the child's peaceful face, and those eyes, his eyes, proof of a secret she had carried alone. As the car disappeared down the empty boulevard, thunder rolled across the city, deep, echoing like fate laughing at him. The red light behind them flickered once, then turned green again, washing the wet pavement in emerald hues. But in Martin's mind, everything remained frozen under that red glare, the color of love lost and blood waiting to be spilled. He leaned back, closing his eyes, but all he could see was her standing in the rain and the haunting thought that maybe she wasn't the only one who'd been hiding all this time. Maybe someone wanted her gone for a reason he had yet to uncover. The rain intensified, drowning out the world beyond the glass. Martin's heart, however, refused to drown. It pounded with a single dangerous realization. If Anila was alive, then everything he believed, everything he buried, every truth he built his empire upon, was a lie. And as the night swallowed the city, one question burned brighter than any streetlight. Who kept her from him? And why did she look so afraid? The answer he didn't yet know, but he could feel it breathing down his neck like a ghost he'd soon be forced to face. The storm outside raged on, unaware that a dead woman's return had just rewritten the destiny of the most feared man in the city. The storm hadn't ended with the night. It had simply moved inside him. Martin's office was drenched in the pale blue glow of the city skyline, but it felt colder than any rain. The clock on the wall ticked through the silence, cruelly steady, as if mocking the chaos that clawed through his veins. He hadn't gone home. He hadn't changed. The rain had dried on his coat, but the chill had burrowed into his bones. Every flicker of lightning beyond the glass dragged his mind back to that red light, to the soaked figure under the lamp, to the little boy's eyes staring back at him through the storm. He had faced death, betrayal, and blood wars without blinking, but one glimpse of her, alive, had left him undone. His world was a ledger of debts and vengeance, and yet the one name written across his heart was the only one he could never erase: Anila. He whispered it under his breath like a curse and a prayer in one breath, his voice breaking through the thick air. The whiskey glass trembled in his hand as he poured another shot, the amber liquid reflecting the faint city glow like fire in a storm. He wasn't drinking for courage. He was drinking to stop feeling. The taste burned, but not enough to erase the image of her cradling that child. Their child, his mind whispered before he could stop it. He slammed the glass down hard enough for it to crack along the rim, a thin line of whiskey bleeding onto the desk like a wound that refused to close. Anila, he muttered again, quieter this time, as if the walls could answer him. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair, the weight of confusion pressing harder than any bullet ever had. He had buried her once. He had mourned her. Now, the line between memory and madness blurred until it hurt to breathe. His phone buzzed on the desk. He didn't look at it. He couldn't face the noise of business. Not tonight. The empire could burn for all he cared. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one tearing through his mind. The door creaked open softly. Adam stepped inside, his expression careful, the kind of caution a man learns when walking through the den of a wounded lion. He had known Martin for years, long enough to read the danger in his silence. "Boss," he said, voice low, respectful, but edged with worry. Martin didn't turn right away. The faint hum of the rain on the windows filled the space between them. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Adam added, half jest, half truth. Martin's head tilted slowly, eyes lifting to meet his. They were different tonight. Colder, emptier. "Maybe I did," he said simply. The words hung in the air like frost. Adam frowned, unsure if he was expected to ask or stay silent. He chose the latter. The less said, the safer he'd be. Martin finally pushed away from the desk, pacing toward the window, staring at the city that bowed beneath his name. His reflection stared back, a man who could command armies, end empires, but couldn't make sense of one heartbeat. Adam cleared his throat softly. "We've got a lead." Martin's attention snapped back like a whip. "On what?" "A woman," Adam said slowly, watching his reaction. "Matching her description. 4th Avenue, selling roses outside the old train underpass." The words landed heavy. Martin didn't breathe for a moment. "Selling roses," he repeated, the irony twisting inside him like a knife. She was once the queen of his world, the light in his fortress of shadows, and now she sold flowers to strangers under the rain. The image crushed him and enraged him all at once. "Find her," he said, his voice steady but low, coiled with command. "Don't touch her. Don't scare her. Just find her." Adam nodded quickly, relieved for orders that didn't end in gunfire. But as he turned to leave, his phone buzzed again. Silent vibration against his palm. Martin didn't notice. He was lost in the city lights, the reflection of ghosts in his glass. Adam stepped into the hallway, shutting the door softly behind him. His hand trembled slightly as he pulled the phone from his pocket. The message glowed across the screen in cold white letters. "Don't let Martin know she's alive, or the boy dies." He froze, eyes darting down the corridor. His throat tightened. He looked back at the closed door, the shadow of Martin pacing within. The air around him felt thick, heavy with something unholy. The message had no name, but he didn't need one. He recognized the tone, the precision. Whoever sent it knew everything. The time, the location, the truth. Martin wasn't supposed to find, and the threat wasn't idle. The boy, the little boy. Adam swallowed hard, a silent curse caught between his teeth. He pocketed the phone, but the message burned into his palm like acid. For years, Adam had been Martin's shadow, his enforcer, his confidant, his voice of reason when rage turned blind. But now he stood between a friend's heartbreak and a child's life. Every instinct screamed that he couldn't tell Martin. Martin Voss didn't handle betrayal with mercy. He didn't handle pain with silence. If he found out someone had kept Anila from him, blood would flood the streets before sunrise. And if Adam disobeyed that message, a child would die. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes, the echo of the rain blending with the pounding in his chest. He wanted to believe there was a way out, but in Martin's world there were only deals with devils. And tonight, the devil had already texted first. Inside the office, Martin sat again, staring at the cracked glass on his desk. His fingers traced the line, following it like a map to the place where everything started to break. He thought of Anila's laughter, the way she'd rest her head on his shoulder after a long day, whispering that love wasn't meant to be perfect. It was meant to be honest. He laughed bitterly at that. Honesty had died the day she did, or the day she disappeared. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone had written this fate for him, that her reappearance wasn't chance. Too clean, too quiet. Someone wanted him to see her. Someone wanted this reaction. He could smell manipulation in the air. It had the same stench as blood and lies. He pressed his palms to his eyes, the migraine pounding behind them like a ticking clock. "Who?" he whispered into the dark. "Who kept you from me?" Down the corridor, Adam made a call. His voice was low, careful. "I got your message," he said to the silence on the other end. "But you're playing with fire. If he finds out—" A calm female voice interrupted, sharp and sure. "Then you'll both burn. Keep him in the dark, Adam, or the child dies before morning." Adam's jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake." "No," the voice replied. "I'm fixing one." Then the line went dead. Adam stood there for a long moment, the phone heavy in his hand, the storm outside pressing against the windows like a living thing. He looked down the hall toward Martin's office, where the faint glow of lamplight spilled under the door. His conscience twisted painfully. Every lie in this world was built on loyalty, and he was about to break both. Inside, Martin picked up the phone, his thumb hovering over a name he hadn't dialed in years. Adrian Voss, his brother, long thought dead, long suspected of betrayal. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Martin hesitated, his gut whispering that whatever was coming next had already begun. The rain outside roared harder, drumming against the windows like war drums. Somewhere, far across the city, under a leaking roof, Anila sat awake beside the sleeping boy. She brushed a curl from his forehead and whispered, "We can't stay here anymore." Her voice trembled as thunder cracked above. "He's close. I can feel him." Back in the office, Martin finally made the call. The line rang once, twice, then clicked alive with a silence more dangerous than any gunshot. "Brother," a voice said on the other end, calm and alive. "It's been a long time." Martin's heart went still. His jaw tightened. "I buried you." Adrian's low laugh slid through the receiver like smoke. "Maybe you buried the wrong ghost." And just like that, the storm outside wasn't the loudest thing in the city anymore. The line went dead, but the echo of Adrian's voice lingered like smoke after a gunshot. Martin stood there, the phone still against his ear, every nerve in his body tightening. His brother, alive. The same brother he once trusted with his life and later buried with his hands. The world had turned into a labyrinth of ghosts, Anila alive. Adrian alive. Every truth he had built his kingdom on was collapsing one lie at a time. The storm outside had finally quieted, but the silence that followed was far more dangerous. It was the kind of silence that came before blood. He didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. The sky shifted from bruised purple to the gray haze of morning while he sat behind the wheel, staring at the city streets still slick from last night's rain. The Mercedes engine purred beneath him, but he hadn't moved for an hour. He didn't call his guards, didn't tell Adam. This was something no one else would understand or survive. If Anila was out there, he needed to face her alone. By the time dawn stretched across the skyline, the streets had begun to stir. Vendors opened their stalls, the air thick with the scent of bread, smoke, and diesel. Martin's car rolled slowly through narrow lanes that didn't belong to men like him. Too poor, too quiet, too real. He found himself at the old market district where the city's forgotten souls sold survival in baskets. It was the last place anyone would think to hide a woman who once wore silk and gold. He parked near a cracked wall covered in faded graffiti. The air smelled of wet earth and wilted petals. For a moment, he just watched, eyes scanning every face, every shadow. And then he saw her, Anila. She was crouched beside a wooden cart, her hair tied loosely, her hands busy folding paper cones for a small boy who placed roses inside each one. She looked different, thinner, paler, but her movement still carried that same quiet grace that used to calm his storms. The child hummed softly, his curls damp from morning dew, his small fingers arranging flowers with more care than most men gave to lives. Martin's throat tightened. He gripped the steering wheel once before letting go, forcing himself to breathe. Then he stepped out. The crunch of gravel beneath his shoes made her head turn slightly, but she didn't see him yet. He walked slowly, every step heavier than the last. The space between them closed like a noose. When he finally spoke, his voice barely made it past his chest. "Anila." She froze. The sound of his voice, deep, trembling, impossible, cut through the morning air like thunder through still water. Her hands stopped moving. The paper cone slipped from her fingers, petals scattering across the ground. She turned slowly, her face pale as if she were seeing a ghost. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice fragile, shaking. Her arms instinctively tightened around the boy. Martin stopped a few feet away, his breath uneven. He studied her, every feature, every tremor, as if confirming she wasn't a hallucination. "You disappeared," he said, the words raw, the anger beneath them strangled by disbelief. "I thought I buried you." Her lips parted, trembling. "You were never meant to find me." His jaw clenched. "Never meant to?" He took a step closer, and she took one back, pulling the child behind her. "You faked your death." His voice rose, not in rage, but in pain. "You let me live thinking you were gone? You let me—" He stopped, his throat closing. The boy peeked curiously from behind her skirt, his wide blue eyes flicking between them. Anila's voice broke the silence, soft and cracked. "You wouldn't have survived the truth." "The truth?" he echoed, stepping closer still. The distance between them shrank to breaths. "Then tell me." She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. Martin followed her gaze, just the empty alley behind them, yet her fear was real, sharp, alive. "Because someone inside your world wanted me dead," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "They burned my car to make you believe I was gone." The words sank like stones into him. For a second, he couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. He saw flashes, the fire, the ashes, the ring, all the things he'd been shown. Lies. All of it. His hands curled into fists. "Who?" Her eyes darted again, toward the far end of the alley where shadows shifted near the fence. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They still watch. If they see me with you—" "Who, Anila?" he demanded, his voice rough, dangerous, desperate. She looked at him, eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "The one who still stands by your side." The world tilted. His breath faltered. There was only one man who fit that description. Adam. The name burned behind his teeth, but before he could say it, the boy spoke. "Mama," the child said suddenly, his voice bright with innocent curiosity. He pointed at Martin with a small, delighted smile. "He looks like me." And just like that, the world went silent. Martin's gaze snapped to the boy, his son, and the truth hit harder than any bullet. His knees felt weak, his heart hammering so violently it drowned out every sound around him. The resemblance was undeniable. The same blue eyes, the same curl to his lips when he smiled, the same quiet intensity in his stare. Martin stumbled back a half step, his breath caught between disbelief and wonder. "Anila," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time in years. "Tell me he's not—" She looked down, clutching the boy to her chest, her silence answering what words could not. Martin's vision blurred. A part of him wanted to fall to his knees, to reach out, to hold them both. But another part, the darker part, screamed betrayal. "You kept him from me," he said, his tone low, almost shaking. "My blood, my son." Tears welled in her eyes. "I had no choice." "No choice?" He laughed, cold, bitter, wounded. "You vanished, Anila. You let me bury ashes. You let me destroy everything looking for you. And all this time—" He gestured toward the boy, his voice cracking. "You were hiding him?" She stepped forward, tears spilling freely now. "If I hadn't, he'd be dead." Martin froze. "What?" "They knew," she whispered, her eyes flicking around as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "They knew I was pregnant before you did. The night they set the car on fire, they weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to erase the proof of what we had." Her voice trembled. "I ran. I hid. Because they said if I ever came back, they'd kill our son." The alley fell into suffocating silence. Martin's fists slowly unclenched. His chest rose and fell unevenly as the meaning behind her words settled like a noose around his heart. Everything, her death, his grief, his rage, had been orchestrated, not by chance, not by fate, but by someone close enough to hold the match. He took a step closer, his voice raw. "Who told you that?" She swallowed hard. "The same man who sent me the last message before I disappeared. The one who swore he'd protect you if I stayed away." Martin's blood ran cold. "Say his name." Her lips parted, but before she could speak, a distant engine roared down the street. Tires screeched. The boy flinched. Anila's eyes widened in panic. "We have to go," she whispered, grabbing the child's hand. Martin's instincts kicked in, years of surviving ambushes teaching him what that sound meant. He grabbed her arm gently but firmly. "Who's after you?" "Not after me," she whispered. "After him." A black van turned sharply into the alley. Its windows tinted, its speed too fast for chance. Martin's body moved before his mind caught up. He pushed Anila and the boy behind a stack of crates just as gunfire split the air. The walls sparked, the scent of burning metal filling the narrow passage. Anila screamed, covering the child with her body. Martin ducked low, pulling his weapon from under his coat, eyes scanning for movement. The van's doors flew open. 2 masked men stepped out, their guns aimed toward the hiding spot. Martin fired first, a clean shot that dropped one instantly. The other returned fire, bullets shattering glass and splintering wood. Anila clutched the boy tighter, whispering his name like a prayer. Martin rolled behind cover, his jaw tight, his mind already spinning. This wasn't random. Someone knew. Someone had sent them. The second shooter retreated to the van, yelling into a radio. Martin caught only fragments. "The boss said no witnesses!" before he fired again, silencing him. The van screeched away, tires shrieking through the puddles. Silence fell again, broken only by Anila's sobs and the boy's quiet whimpering. Martin stood slowly, his gun still raised, scanning the end of the alley. But they were gone. He turned to her, breathing hard. "You're not running again," he said firmly. "Not this time." Anila shook her head, trembling. "You don't understand. They'll come again. They never stop." Martin's expression hardened, his jaw set. "Let them come." He glanced down at the boy, who was now staring up at him with wide, trusting eyes. For the first time in years, Martin felt something break inside him, something human. He knelt, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's his name?" "Eris," she said softly. Martin closed his eyes for a moment, whispering the name as if claiming it. Eris. When he opened them again, his gaze was steel. "Anila, whoever did this, whoever's pulling these strings, they'll wish they never touched what's mine." She wanted to believe him, but fear still flickered behind her eyes. And from the rooftop above them, unseen, a figure lowered a pair of binoculars. Adam's voice came through his earpiece, cold, hollow, conflicted. "Target confirmed," he whispered into the mic. "She's alive, and so is the boy." A pause crackled through the line, then that same female voice from the night before replied softly, "Then you know what to do." Adam closed his eyes, the weight of loyalty and guilt tearing him apart. Below him, Martin wrapped his coat around Anila and Eris, unaware that betrayal was already breathing down his neck. And in the alley of truth, love had finally come face to face with the lie that had been waiting to destroy it. The night spread over the city like spilled ink, swallowing the skyline in silence. Martin drove with one hand on the wheel, the other clutching the small wooden toy that had fallen from the boy's hands. The initials carved on its side, MV, mocked him under the dashboard light. Martin Vaughn, his name, his blood, his son. Every turn of the car's wheels echoed against the hollow ache in his chest. The rain had stopped, but the roads were slick, shimmering beneath the faint glow of passing lamps. His mansion loomed ahead, grand and cold, a fortress built from years of sin and loyalty that now tasted like poison. Inside, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and stood before the tall windows overlooking the sleeping city. The amber liquid trembled in his hand. Anila's words kept looping in his mind like a curse. "The one who still stands by your side." There weren't many left who stood by him. Adam had been there from the beginning. His shadow, his shield, his brother in blood, if not in name. The man who would take a bullet for him without flinching. The man he now suspected had aimed one at the woman he loved. But why? Why Adam? What had driven him to betray everything? The mansion felt emptier than ever. The portraits of his ancestors glared down from the walls as if judging his weakness. Martin's reflection stared back from the glass, a face carved with fury and confusion. He wanted to break something, everything, but the only sound was the soft clink of his glass as he set it down. Then he looked at the toy again. That crude little carving hit harder than any betrayal. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Proof that his son had thought of him, even without knowing who he was. Martin ran a thumb across the rough letters, feeling the edges cut faintly against his skin. It grounded him, reminded him of what mattered now. He would burn the city before letting anyone touch that boy again. Hours passed. The mansion's grand clock struck midnight, echoing through the marble halls. Martin hadn't moved. His mind replayed the alley, the fear in Anila's eyes, the innocence in Eris's face, the gunfire, the truth. Somewhere in that storm of memory lay the answer. He knew he couldn't rest until he found it. By the time he left the house again, the night had thinned to fog. His car cut through the deserted streets toward the old market, the place that now held more truth than his entire empire. He parked a block away and walked the rest of the path, boots splashing through shallow puddles. The world felt colder here, too quiet, too alert. He passed shuttered stalls and broken lanterns until he saw the faint flicker of a small fire. Anila sat beside it, wrapped in a worn shawl. Her face was half lit by the flames, eyes hollow yet alive, her hand gently stroking the hair of the boy who slept in her lap. The sight rooted Martin in place. It was too pure for a man like him. He stood for a long time, watching the rise and fall of the child's small chest, the way Anila's fingers trembled as she kept him warm. The scent of roses mixed with smoke lingered in the air, fragile, fleeting, like the life she had built in hiding. Finally, Martin stepped closer. The gravel shifted under his shoes, and Anila looked up. Their eyes met across the glow of the fire. She didn't flinch this time. She simply whispered, "You shouldn't have come." Martin's voice was softer than he meant it to be. "He's mine, isn't he?" The fire crackled between them, and her silence was louder than any confession. The flicker of her tears caught the light before falling onto Eris's curls. That was all the answer he needed. Martin exhaled shakily, sinking to one knee in front of them. His hand hovered above the boy's shoulder, but didn't touch. "He looks like me," he murmured. Anila nodded faintly, her lips pressed tight. "He has your stubbornness, too," she said, almost smiling through her pain. "And your eyes." Martin let out a broken breath. "You should have told me." "I couldn't," she whispered. "They would have killed him." His gaze lifted sharply. "They told me you were dead," he said, voice trembling with restrained fury. "I buried what I thought was left of you. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Her chin quivered, but she held his stare. "And do you know what it did to me to hide him? To hear him ask why his father was a ghost?" she said, her tone breaking at the edges. "Every night, I told him stories of a brave man who fought monsters. I just never told him you were one of them." The words hit deep. Martin flinched slightly, not out of anger but guilt. "I had to protect him," she continued, brushing a hand over Eris's cheek. "They said if I returned, they'd kill you both." His eyes darkened. "Who's they?" he whispered. She hesitated, the firelight dancing in her gaze like shards of memory. "The man you trust more than your blood." Silence pressed between them. The air grew heavier, the fire popping faintly as if reacting to her words. Martin's jaw tightened until it hurt. "Adam," he said finally, his voice low and dangerous, almost a growl. Anila's eyes flickered in pain, but she didn't deny it. "He warned me the night I escaped," she said, her voice shaking. "He said if you knew the truth, it would destroy you both, that he could protect you only if I stayed dead." "Protect me?" Martin hissed. "By destroying everything I had?" "You don't understand," she said quickly. "There's someone above him, someone worse. Adam wasn't acting alone." Martin's hands curled into fists. "Who?" Anila shook her head. "He never said a name. Only that the one pulling the strings wears the crown of your empire now." A chill ran through Martin. That could mean only one thing. The Council, the group of 5 men who controlled every major move in his criminal network. He trusted them with the empire when he buried himself in grief. If one of them was behind this, then everything he'd built was already compromised. The thought burned through him like acid. He rose slowly, the reflection of the fire twisting across his face. "Where were you all these years?" he asked quietly. "Hiding," she whispered, "moving from city to city, selling roses, sewing clothes, anything to stay invisible." She paused, her voice breaking. "Every time I saw a black car, I thought it was them. Every time Eris laughed too loud, I feared someone would hear." Martin looked at the child again, small, peaceful, unaware that the world wanted him dead. His chest ached in a way he hadn't felt since he lost her. "You should have trusted me," he said softly. "You were the only one I ever did trust," she replied. Her voice cracked as she added, "That's why I had to disappear, because loving you was the only way to kill you." Martin's breath caught, his anger melting into something far more painful. He took a slow step forward, kneeling again near her side. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "Whatever they planned, whatever they tried to take, ends now." Anila's eyes filled with tears. She didn't blink away this time. "They'll come for him again," she whispered. "Then they'll find me waiting," Martin said coldly. But as he spoke, a faint click echoed in the shadows beyond the fire, metal against stone. Martin froze. His instinct screamed. He turned sharply, scanning the dark alley beyond. A shadow moved, a figure watching. For a brief second, the firelight caught the faint glint of a gun barrel. "Down!" Martin barked, pushing Anila aside as a bullet sliced through the night. The shot shattered a bottle beside the fire, sending glass and flame scattering. Anila shielded Eris, pulling him into her arms as Martin drew his weapon, firing into the dark. 2 flashes answered from the opposite wall, one above, one behind. They were surrounded. "Stay with him," Martin growled, rolling behind an overturned cart. Another shot grazed his shoulder, pain flaring hot and fast. He fired again, hitting one of the attackers. The other darted behind a pillar. The standoff stretched, heavy and silent but for the crackle of dying flames. Then, the whisper of retreating footsteps. The shooter fled. Martin didn't chase. He turned back toward Anila, blood seeping through his sleeve. "We're out of time," he said, voice rough. "Pack whatever you have. You're coming with me." "Martin, no arguments." His tone left no room for protest. "They found you once. They won't get a second chance." She hesitated, clutching Eris close. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere no one will look," he said. His eyes softened as he glanced at the boy. "Home." But high above the street, hidden in the fog, a red laser flickered once before vanishing. A voice whispered through a radio, "Target moving, awaiting new orders." And somewhere in the darkness, Adam's phone buzzed again. His thumb hovered over the screen as he read the message that would shatter what little loyalty he had left. If you can't finish the job, someone else will. 5. The morning dawned gray, soaked in the scent of gun oil and guilt. Martin stood in his office before the massive window overlooking the drenched city, his reflection fractured by raindrops. He hadn't slept. Every tick of the clock was a hammer against his skull, every beat of his heart whispering one name, Adam. The one who had shared his victories, bled beside him, and guarded his empire like a brother. Now that same name tasted like poison on his tongue. When Adam entered, his footsteps echoed too loud in the silence. He looked exhausted. The dark circles beneath his eyes mirrored Martin's, but there was something else there. Something that didn't belong. Hesitation. Guilt. Martin turned slowly, his expression unreadable. The storm outside rolled thunder as if nature itself waited for the truth. "Where were you?" Martin began, his tone sharp as a blade's edge. 3 years ago, when Anila's car burned." Adam froze mid-step. His lips parted, but words tangled on his tongue. His hands twitched. A habit Martin had seen only once before, the night Adam lied to save his own skin in Sicily. "I searched for her, boss," Adam finally said, voice breaking. "I swear on my life I—" "Don't." Martin's voice sliced through the air, cold and merciless. "Don't you dare lie to me." The air in the room thickened. The silence between them stretched so tight it could snap. Adam's jaw clenched, but the tremor in his eyes betrayed him. He looked down, unable to meet Martin's gaze, and whispered, "I didn't want to kill her." The words slammed into Martin like a gunshot. His veins turned to ice. Didn't want to kill her. That meant he could have. He took one step forward, then another, until the desk was no longer between them. "You what?" Adam's voice cracked. "She found out about the ledger." Martin frowned. confusion flashing for a second before understanding dawned, and fury followed. "The ledger?" he repeated. "The one you told me was destroyed?" Adam nodded, his throat bobbing. "It wasn't. It holds everything. The names, the deals, the money trails. If that ever got out, every man under your command, every alliance you built, would burn." She saw it, Martin. She wasn't supposed to, but she did. Martin's blood pounded in his ears. "So you used her?" he hissed. "You let her vanish? You let me bury ashes that weren't even hers? Just to protect your secrets?" Adam shook his head violently, tears burning in his eyes. "No, I used it to save her. Don't you understand? Rafe wanted her dead. He gave the order himself." The name struck like lightning. Rafe Santoro, his father's oldest partner, the man who built half of Martin's empire with blood and betrayal, the same man who vanished after his father's death, taking half their fortune with him. Martin's chest tightened until he could barely breathe. "You're telling me Rafe Santoro was behind it all?" Adam's voice dropped to a whisper. "Yes, he said she was leverage. He said if she lived, you'd never stop looking for him." Martin moved so fast Adam barely saw it. 1 second they were standing apart. The next, Martin's hand was around his collar, dragging him forward, fury blazing in his eyes. "You let me mourn her," he growled. "You stood beside me while I buried ashes and said nothing." Adam's voice trembled. "It was the only way to keep her safe." Martin shoved him back against the wall, the sound echoing through the mansion. "Safe? You call 3 years of hiding, selling roses on the streets, safe? You call making her raise my son in fear safe?" His voice broke, raw and dangerous. "You don't know what you've done." Adam's breathing came fast and shallow. "I did what I had to," he whispered. "I had to choose between you and her, and if Rafe found out she was alive—" "Enough." Martin's voice was low, almost a growl. He turned away, running a trembling hand through his hair. He couldn't trust his fists right now. He couldn't trust anything. His heart was a battlefield of loyalty and rage. Outside, thunder crashed again, a fitting echo of the chaos tearing through him. When he finally spoke, his tone was lethal calm. "You have one chance to prove everything you've said isn't another lie." Adam blinked, uncertain. What do you want me to do?" Martin turned, his expression dark and unreadable. "Bring me Rafe Santoro, alive." Adam swallowed, his Adam's apple twitching. "That's suicide," he whispered. Martin stepped closer, his face inches from Adam's. "No, that's redemption." Adam nodded shakily. His eyes darted away, but guilt weighed on every word. "You'll get him, boss," he said quietly. "I promise." Martin didn't respond. He just stared, watching the man he once trusted retreat from the room. The sound of the door closing was like a coffin lid sealing shut. For a long moment, Martin stood there, motionless. His reflection in the window stared back at him, cold, broken, barely human. The one who still stands by your side. Anila's words returned, like ghosts whispering in his ear. He realized then that trust was a weapon, and his had already been used against him. As the storm raged outside, Martin reached for the drawer beneath his desk and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, her wedding ring lay dull from years of neglect. He turned it over in his palm, the metal cold, the memories colder. He closed his fist around it. "Rafe Santoro," he muttered, his tone low and dangerous. "You started this. Now I'll finish it." But in the hallway, Adam stopped for a moment, hand shaking over his phone. A new message had already arrived, from an unknown number. "You bring Rafe, you die. You warn Martin, the boy dies." Adam's face went pale. His throat tightened as he stared at the message. For the first time in years, the loyal right-hand man of Martin Voss realized he was no longer serving power. He was serving a trap. He deleted the message with trembling fingers, forcing his breath steady. "I'll fix it," he whispered to himself. I'll fix everything. But deep down, he knew. The storm had only just begun, and far away, in a dimly lit alley, Anila held her sleeping son close, unaware that the man hunting their nightmares had just unleashed a war that could burn them all. The clock struck midnight. The mansion lights flickered once, then steadied. Martin poured another glass of whiskey, staring into the amber liquid, unaware that the next name written in Rafe's ledger was his own. The phone on Martin's desk buzzed. No name, just one line lighting up the screen. You were never supposed to find her. 6. The night Martin received the message. The city slept under a blanket of restless thunder, but his mind refused to. You were never supposed to find her. The words pulsed in his skull like a curse. By dawn, he was already gone. The mansion behind him swallowed by fog, his car carving through wet roads toward the countryside. The decision had been made long before his engine started. He couldn't trust his men. He couldn't trust Adam. Not after the ledger, not after the betrayal. Only one truth mattered now: Anila and the boy. He would keep them safe himself, even if it meant putting a bullet through everyone else he ever called brother. The safe house sat on a forgotten patch of land, surrounded by whispering pines and damp soil. Its windows were cracked but barred, its walls thick enough to bury secrets. It was where Martin once went to heal from bullet wounds, the kind no doctor could treat. Now it was where he brought the two people who had reopened them. When Anila stepped inside, her eyes scanned the shadows. The air smelled faintly of gun oil and pine. Her son clung to her hand, his small steps uncertain. Martin watched her from the doorway, silent, his presence filling the room like smoke. She finally turned to face him. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered, her voice soft yet sharp with fear. Martin's gaze met hers, steady, unflinching. "You think I could walk away after seeing you alive?" His tone was quiet, but every word carried the weight of 3 lost years. Anila looked down, brushing her son's hair from his eyes. "You put yourself in their sights again," she said. "If they find you—" "They already have," he interrupted, stepping closer, his voice low. "And if they come, they'll only find me, not you." His words made her chest ache, not because of what he said, but because she knew it was true. Martin Voss had always been the shield that broke before it bent. She wanted to hate him for it, but the sight of him standing there, his jaw tight, his shirt damp from rain, made it impossible. When night fell, the forest outside the safe house grew alive with the sound of wind and crickets, yet inside, silence held them captive. Martin sat by the window, his gun resting on the table beside him, watching the darkness for movement. Anila lay on the couch near the fire, her son asleep against her chest, his small breath soft and steady, every flicker of the flames reflected on her face, tracing the fatigue, the fear, and something else. Longing. She watched him too when she thought. He wasn't looking. The man who once ruled cities now sat guarding their shadows like a penitent soldier. Hours passed before exhaustion claimed her, but peace never did. When she woke, it wasn't to quiet, it was to the sound of her own heartbeat racing. A nightmare had gripped her again. She sat up, her skin damp with sweat, her breath ragged. The moonlight fell across her trembling hands. Martin was there instantly, crossing the room without a sound. "It's just a dream," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "You're safe here." But safety was a word she no longer believed in. "They took everything from us," she choked out, her fists pounding weakly against his chest. "Our years, our peace, our son's name." He caught her wrists gently, pressing them against his heart. "Not everything," he murmured. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned. "They didn't take this." For a long moment neither spoke. Then something inside her broke, not in pain but in surrender. She leaned forward and he pulled her close. Her tears soaked into his shirt and his breath tangled in her hair. The distance of years melted between them like frost before a fire. He kissed her forehead first, a prayer, then her cheeks, an apology, then her lips, a resurrection. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't innocent. It was everything that had been denied to them. Years of silence, fury, and buried devotion igniting all at once. Her fingers trembled against his jaw, tracing the scars life had carved there. His hands gripped her waist as though he feared she'd vanish again. The world outside could have burned, and neither would have noticed. When she pulled away, her eyes shone, with both tears and fire. "If we die," she whispered, "we die together this time." Martin rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her skin. "Together," he echoed, and for the first time in years, it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a vow. The hours that followed were wordless, wrapped in moonlight and the soft hum of a dying fire. For a fleeting moment, the world had no enemies, no betrayals, only them, breathing the same fragile air. But peace never lasted long in Martin's world. When dawn crept through the curtains, it carried the scent of damp earth and danger. Anila stirred, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. A soft laugh broke the silence. Her son, standing at the door, watching them with sleepy curiosity. "Mama," he giggled, "you and him were sleeping funny." Anila blushed, her heart fluttering between embarrassment and warmth. Martin couldn't help but smile, the kind of smile he hadn't worn in years. "Come here, little man," he said softly, and when the boy ran into his arms, Martin felt something inside him heal. For the first time he held his son, truly held him. And every wound, every war, suddenly made sense. But peace, as always, was short-lived. As Anila turned toward the window, a sound broke through the morning. Faint at first, then unmistakable. An engine. Slow. Crawling up the gravel road like a beast scenting prey. Her body stiffened. Martin's expression changed in an instant. Tenderness vanished, replaced by steel. He placed the boy behind her and reached for his gun. "Stay quiet," he said. "Don't move until I say." Anila's heart pounded. Through the window, dust began to rise from the road's bend. The sunlight caught the glint of metal. Several cars, black, their windows tinted. Not hunters, soldiers. "How did they find us?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Martin's jaw tightened. "They didn't. Someone led them." Her breath hitched. "Adam?" His silence was an answer she didn't want. The sound of the cars grew louder, engines purring with lethal precision. Birds scattered from the trees as tires crunched over gravel. Martin glanced at her one last time. "If anything happens to me, don't," she interrupted fiercely. "Don't you dare finish that." He almost smiled. "Then keep him safe." The boy clung to Anila's leg, confused by the sudden fear in the air. "Mama, what's happening?" "Nothing, baby," she whispered, though her voice shook. "Nothing at all." Outside, the first car stopped. Doors opened. Boots hit the ground. The faint hum of radios, the metallic click of weapons. Rafe's men, unmistakable. Martin crouched near the window, gun raised, eyes narrowed. His heartbeat slowed, not from calm but focus. He was back in his element, chaos. Yet this time, the stakes weren't territory or pride. They were flesh and blood, his family. The doorknob rattled once, then went still. The silence was unbearable. Anila pressed her hand to her son's head, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since she'd faked her death. Then, from outside, a voice echoed through the morning, calm, cold. "Martin Voss," it said. "Rafe sends his regards." Martin exhaled slowly, his finger tightening on the trigger. His eyes flicked to Anila, their gazes locking. A silent promise. No more running, no more hiding. If the fire was coming, they'd face it together. The doorknob turned again, this time followed by a whisper from the other side. "We already have the boy." 7. The gunfire ripped through the dawn like thunder tearing apart heaven itself. Martin's body moved before his mind caught up, instincts honed by years in the underworld. He grabbed Anila by the waist, pulling her and their son down behind the thick stone wall of the cottage. The scent of spent gunpowder filled the air, sharp and metallic, mingling with the fragrance of roses crushed under their knees. "Stay down! Don't move!" he shouted, his voice raw and commanding. The little boy whimpered, clutching his mother's dress, while Anila pressed his head against her chest, whispering broken prayers under her breath. Martin peered over the wall, his pistol drawn tight against his palm. The first thing he saw was a black SUV halfway down the muddy road, doors open, men spilling out, rifles raised. Rafe's crest marked their sleeves. His pulse quickened. They'd found them sooner than he'd feared. One of the men fired, the bullet grazing a chunk of plaster inches from Martin's cheek. He ducked, exhaled slowly, and returned fire. 2 quick shots. 2 men dropped before their guns even hit the ground. But there were more. At least 8, maybe 10. He turned his head slightly, eyes burning through the smoke. "Anila!" he rasped. "Take him and stay behind the fireplace. There's a hollow panel behind the woodpile. Use it." She looked at him, terror shaking her voice. "Martin, you'll get killed." He met her eyes, calm and cold despite the chaos. "If they get in here, they'll kill all of us. Do what I say." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she nodded, clutching their son and crawling toward the hidden space. The boy's tiny voice broke his heart. "Daddy, don't go." Martin froze just a second, forced a smile that never reached his eyes, and whispered, "I'll be right back, soldier." Another blast shattered the window. Martin spun, rolled behind the wall, and emptied half a clip through the shattered frame. The bodies outside hit the dirt, one by one. But for every man who fell, 2 more appeared. He could hear them shouting orders. "Surround the back! Burn him out if you have to!" His breath came ragged, smoke and fury burning in his lungs. He darted across the room, kicked over the kitchen table, and upended a bottle of vodka over it. One spark from his lighter, and the wood ignited in a wall of flame. "You want a war?" he growled, loading his last magazine. "Come and get it." He burst out the side door, rain and ash mixing on his skin. The ground was slick, the grass flattened under boot prints. 2 men rounded the corner, rifles raised. Martin dove into a roll, came up on one knee, and fired twice. Both dropped. He kept moving, low and fast, weaving between the rose bushes that Anila had planted days ago, the same roses that now bled crimson petals into the mud. Every breath was pain, every heartbeat a drumbeat of survival. A car door slammed, a familiar voice rose over the chaos. "Still protecting what's already mine?" Martin froze mid-step. That voice, gravel and arrogance soaked in venom. Rafe Santoro stepped into view, his black coat billowing in the storm wind. His hair was streaked with gray now, but his eyes were the same, cold, pitiless, hungry for control. Behind him, 4 more men stood ready, weapons aimed, but none fired. Rafe raised a hand, stopping them. "Put the guns down," he said with a smirk. "Let him hear what I have to say before he dies." Martin straightened slowly, the rain dripping down his jaw, mixing with the streak of blood at his temple. "You destroyed my family," he said quietly, the words trembling with rage. Rafe laughed, a deep, ugly sound. "Destroyed? No, boy. I built it. Every dollar you own, every man who bows to your name, all of it came from me, from my blood, my betrayal, my deals. You were nothing but a soldier wearing your father's crown." Martin's grip tightened on his gun. "You talk too much for a dying man." Rafe tilted his head. "She was never yours to begin with. Your father promised her, and her family, to me. You think she loved you? She loved freedom. And I was the one who gave it to her, until you came along." Martin's jaw clenched, fury simmering beneath his skin. "You're wrong," he said through his teeth. She chose me, and you burned her for it." Rafe's smirk faltered. Martin didn't wait for him to recover. He fired one clean shot, and Rafe fell to one knee, clutching his leg, blood spilling through his fingers. He gasped, then laughed again, pain twisting his face into something monstrous. "You think killing me ends this?" he spat. "You have no idea what's coming next." Martin stepped forward, gun raised again, eyes burning with vengeance. "Then enlighten me." But before he could pull the trigger, another voice sliced through the storm. "Drop it!" Martin froze. He didn't need to turn to know the voice. Adam. His shadow. His brother in arms. His betrayer. Slowly, Martin turned his head, and there he was, standing behind him, drenched in rain, gun aimed straight at Martin's back. For a moment, the world went silent except for the wind whistling through the broken glass. The three men, Martin, Rafe, Adam, formed a triangle of betrayal. Martin's eyes narrowed. "So it's true," he said softly. "You couldn't choose before. Now you have." Adam's jaw trembled. "You don't understand. If I don't do this, he'll kill the boy." Martin's heartbeat faltered. The boy, his son. "What did you say?" Rafe chuckled weakly from the ground, blood staining his teeth. "You didn't think I came here without insurance, did you? He's with my men. One word from me, and he disappears forever." Martin's grip tightened on the gun until his knuckles turned white. His gaze flicked between them, Adam's trembling aim, Rafe's smug defiance. The rain poured harder, each drop feeling like a countdown. "You touch him," Martin growled, "and I swear I'll burn every inch of your empire to the ground." Rafe's smirk deepened. "You already did. You just don't know it yet." Adam's finger twitched on the trigger. He didn't want to do it. That much Martin could see. His eyes begged forgiveness even as his gun stayed steady. "I have no choice," Adam whispered. "Please, boss, don't make me." Martin took one slow step forward. "You always have a choice," he said, voice like thunder. "You made one when you lied. Make the right one now." The silence that followed stretched to eternity. Even the rain seemed to pause. Adam's lips parted. He was about to say something, but before a sound escaped, another gunshot exploded through the air. Rafe's body jerked violently, his head snapping back. A single bullet had found his heart. Both Martin and Adam turned toward the source and saw Anila standing by the doorway, her trembling hands still clutching the pistol she'd just fired. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with horror and defiance. "No one," she said, her voice shaking, "threatens my child." Rafe's body slumped into the mud, lifeless blood flowing around the scattered rose petals. For a moment, no one moved. The world stood still, suspended between relief and terror. Then Martin dropped his gun and ran to her, pulling her into his arms. But before he could speak, a faint click echoed behind him. Adam's gun, still aimed, still shaking. "Adam," Martin said, breathless, eyes locked on him. "It's over. Drop it." Adam shook his head slowly, tears streaking his face. "No, it's never over." Anila's voice broke in a whisper. "Adam, please, you don't have to do this." His gaze flicked between them, the woman he saved, the man he betrayed, the family he broke to protect. His hand trembled harder. "He said if Rafe dies, the order passes to someone else," Adam muttered. "Someone worse." Martin's brow furrowed. "Who?" But Adam's answer came out barely audible, swallowed by the rain. "Your father." Martin froze. His mind went blank. His father had been dead for years. Adam's finger tightened on the trigger. Mini cliffhanger. The last thing Martin heard was a faint whisper before the thunder rolled again. "He's not dead. Martin, he's been waiting for you." The light turns green began in silence, the kind that hummed between heartbeats and gunpowder. Smoke curled from the broken window, the echo of gunfire still trapped in the cold countryside air. Martin stood still, his breath coming in ragged gasps, the scent of metal and betrayal heavy around him. Adam's gun was still raised, but his eyes no longer held defiance, only conflict, a storm of guilt and loyalty wrestling for dominance. "Put the gun down, brother," Martin said, voice low, the kind that had once commanded armies and silenced traitors. But now it carried pain. Deep, human, unguarded pain. Adam's fingers quivered on the trigger, the weight of years pressing on him. "You were never supposed to survive Rafe's world," he muttered, his tone cracking under the strain of memory. "He promised me the Empire, if I delivered you." The words cut through Martin's chest like a second bullet, sharper than betrayal itself. Martin took a step closer, every movement deliberate, his eyes never leaving Adam's. "And you believed him?" he whispered, with a bitter smile that trembled like glass. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, a gunshot, not from Adam. The sound came from behind, deafening yet hollow, echoing through the trees. Adam's eyes widened in disbelief before they softened, his weapon slipping from his grasp. He looked down at the crimson spreading across his shirt, life bleeding away. Anila stood at the doorway, her hands shaking violently, the pistol trembling in her grasp. Her tears glistened as they mixed with the smoke and morning light. "He was going to kill you," she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of what she'd done. Adam stumbled forward, collapsing to his knees, his breath shallow. Martin rushed to catch him before he fell completely. For a moment, two brothers who had once shared loyalty and laughter were reunited in pain. Adam looked up at him, eyes hazy, lips trembling. "I saved you once," he murmured, and then his hand fell, limp, to the ground. Silence reclaimed the room. Anila dropped the gun, the sound of it clattering against the floor louder than the gunfire itself. She stood frozen, watching as Martin closed Adam's eyes with shaking fingers. The man who had once betrayed him was now gone, but his shadow would remain. Martin looked up, his chest heaving. Outside, faint sirens wailed, growing closer, the echo of justice, or perhaps another storm. Anila stumbled toward him, her steps uneven, tears streaming freely. "It's over," she breathed, her voice trembling like the last leaf before winter. Martin looked at her, eyes burning with a mixture of grief and defiance. "No," he said softly, pulling her into his arms. "It's beginning." In that embrace, the chaos stilled. The empire built on blood had ended, and what remained was two souls clinging to the ashes, ready to build something new. Months passed, the world slowly softening around them. The flower shop they opened in the countryside became a sanctuary, a place where time didn't chase them anymore. Roses bloomed where bullet shells once fell, and laughter echoed in corners that used to harbor whispers of fear. The boy, bright-eyed and curious, filled their days with questions and small innocent joys that healed wounds deeper than any scar. Every morning Martin would drive to the market to pick up supplies, his car passing through the familiar intersection, the one where the traffic light always seemed to stay red just long enough to make him pause, the same red light where he had once lost everything, and somehow found it again. Anila would sit by the window, watching him go, her fingers tracing the petals of fresh roses, red, white, and yellow, each color a memory, a symbol of survival. Martin would often stop there, looking at the green light flicker ahead, remembering the promise he once made. If they die together. But now, life stretched before them, uncertain, fragile, but real. One quiet morning, with the boy giggling in the shop and the scent of blooming roses surrounding them, Martin held Anila's hand as they stepped outside. The air was crisp, peaceful, touched by sunlight and the hum of distant life. For the first time in years, there was no fear in his chest, only calm, only her. The light ahead turned green, a symbol of everything they'd endured, the permission to move forward. Martin smiled faintly, brushing a loose strand of hair from Anila's face. "We made it," she whispered. He nodded, his thumb tracing the back of her hand. "We did." But just as he took a step forward, a sleek black car glided past them, its engine purring like a predator beneath silk. The windows were tinted, the kind that reflected the world without revealing the darkness inside. Martin's instincts twitched, that old chill crawling down his spine. He turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing. Through the glass, he thought he saw movement, a shadow, a face too familiar to be real. Then a voice, faint but unmistakable, drifted through the hum of the passing car, a whisper that froze the air. Phase 2. The words clung to the wind like a curse. Anila turned to him, confusion etching her features. What did they say? Martin didn't answer. His hand tightened around hers, his gaze fixed on the disappearing car as it vanished into the distance. His reflection lingered in the glass, haunted, ready. The peace they had built trembled like a rose in a storm. Somewhere in the world, a new game had begun. But Martin knew one thing. He would not run this time. He had already lost everything once. Now he would fight for what he had left. The light turned green again, glowing over the quiet road, its color washing over them, a signal of life, of continuation, of choices still to come. Anila leaned her head against his shoulder, unaware of the storm forming beyond the horizon. Martin looked ahead, his expression unreadable, part serenity, part warning. Behind them, the flower shop door swayed gently in the breeze, the scent of roses mingling with something sharper, the scent of fate circling back. The black car disappeared into the misty road, leaving only silence. Martin exhaled slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. So it begins again. The wind carried his words away as he held Anila closer. The world moving forward on the green light, unaware that love and danger had just met again on the same road. And as the petals fell from the roses that morning, it wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of another war. Written not in bullets this time, but in the quiet vows of two hearts that refused to break. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Heartwoven Tales, where emotions meet destiny and every story breathes life into love, loss, and redemption. Your support helps us weave more tales that stay with you long after the final line. Like the story if you felt every heartbeat of Martin and Anila's journey, share it with your friends who believe in second chances and leave your feedback. Your words inspire the next story waiting to be told. Stay tuned, because every tale in Heartwoven Tales hides another heartbeat you've yet to hear.